Good morning, Epic Church. How are we? You picked such a great day to come. I hope that you'll feel that way when you leave, but I believe that it's a great day for you to be here. Before we get into the message this morning, let me just give you a couple of church-wide things happening. A week from tonight will be our last 6 p.m. service. So March 3rd will be the last time we do the 6 p.m., at least for now. And so starting on March the 10th, that's a time change night, so get prepared for that. That's usually when we lose an hour of sleep, the 9:30 crowd tends to shift somewhat to the 11. So that'll happen. But on March the 10th, we'll be in 2 services, 9:30 and 11. Let you in on a little bit. I'm not believing that having to go to 3 morning services is too far away for us. We had one of perhaps our largest 9:30 crowd ever this morning, and it looks like we're going to have a great crowd today. Remember that people are going to continue to come in this morning, so if you can make room where you are, that would be great. So that's the deal. 2 services starting on March the 10th, and then on Easter, March 31st, just 5 weeks away from today, we're actually going to squeeze in 3 services that morning. So we'll have a 9:15, a 10:30, and an 11:45. You'll start to hear more about that next week, and also how you can volunteer for one of those services, even if it's not one of your normal things. If you've been in church for any time in your life, you probably know that Easter is one of those days where attendance tends to double and stuff like that. So we'll get more information to you about that in the next 5 weeks or so. We are continuing our Rejecting Status Quo series this morning, and I just want to say on behalf of the staff, continue to keep your emails and correspondence with us about this series coming. Probably, especially in a 2-week time frame, we've heard so much about what God's up to. We've sat across from you in coffee shops and at meals. You've sent us emails, Facebook messages, shout-outs on Twitter. Continue to let us know. It seems like God has, it's cool when he does this, when somebody walks away and they go, hey, Ben, that message was just for me, but then you hear it from 5 or 6 people and you're like, okay, God, thanks for leading me in my own ignorance to talk about what we need to be hearing. And so I want to do that today. And what we've been saying in this series is that this Rejecting Status Quo, the idea is that faith always has a next move. It always has a next move. There are times in our lives where we think, here's the big faith move of our life. We make that move, and then it's, oh, that just unlocks a lot of other faith moves. And so that's what we've been doing. And what I want to do today is just realize that when we consider what God is up to in our lives or what he's stirring in our hearts, one of the things that we begin to do is ask ourselves questions, which is a great thing. You need to have a set of questions that you ask yourself. And so we get answers to those questions. And then those answers, they tend to dictate the decisions that we make in our lives. They even determine the kind of lives we end up living. And they inform us in what we're willing to pursue and what we're afraid to pursue. And so here are some of the questions that we ask. We ask questions like this. Is there anything in this situation I should be afraid of? Is it logically unlikely that it will happen? We begin to ask questions like, is it going to be easy to accomplish? Or does it all make sense? Find questions, but then we answer those questions, and then we live a life based off our responses and based off what those answers are. And I think you're bright people. Let me just make sure that I can say that before. Yeah, most of us in the room are pretty bright people, and so you get the correct answers, but here's my fear. We could be asking the wrong questions. And so who cares if we get correct answers to questions that shouldn't be the leading questions in our lives? And so what I want to do is, looking through the lens of Moses' life, I want to give you 5 shifts to make from one question to another. And so what I want to do, though, we're looking at an Old Testament character. I want to do what we did last week, look at his story out of a New Testament book. So we'll be in Hebrews 11 again this morning. You can turn there if you have a Bible. If you need a Bible, raise your hand. We've got great volunteers that are distributing those. Just keep your hands up high. If you receive one of these Bibles or you use one of these weekly, we're on page 652. For the rest of us, we'll be in Hebrews chapter 11, verses 23 through 29. And we'll be looking at Moses' life. And what I'll do is I'll read this, and then we'll get into, here's some shifts that we need to be willing to make. And so you guys keep coming in. This is fun. Still have some music, so you haven't missed all the music. It's going to happen later on in the service, I promise. Hebrews chapter 11, we'll start in verse 23. Would you guys stand with me as we read this? Actually, I'll read it, but you can read alongside me quietly, or if you want to match my voice, feel free to do so. Hebrews 11, 23 through 29, it says this: By faith, Moses, when he was born, was hidden for 3 months by his parents because they saw that the child was beautiful. It makes me think, what if he wasn't? Right? Like, this isn't part of my message, but I'm just like, what if he wasn't beautiful? Anyway, they saw that their child was beautiful, and they were not afraid of the king's edict. By faith, Moses, when he was grown up, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter, choosing rather to be mistreated with the people of God than to enjoy the fleeting pleasures of sin. He considered the reproach of Christ greater wealth than the treasures of Egypt, for he was looking forward to the reward. By faith, he left Egypt, not being afraid of the anger of the king, for he endured as seeing him who is invisible. By faith, he kept the Passover and sprinkled the blood, so that the destroyer of the firstborn might not touch them. By faith, the people crossed the Red Sea as on dry land, but the Egyptians, when they attempted to do the same, were drowned. You may be seated. I pray that God will teach us something from Moses' life, certainly teach us from the scriptures. We believe that there's power in the word of God, and so, man, let's get into seeing what God has to say to us. The first shift I think that we need to make is this. We need to shift from asking the question, what is best for me today, and begin asking the question, what is best for God's kingdom long term? You'll see these on the screen, I believe, but we ask the question, and it's a logical question, and it's the question all of us are born with. You see it in the eyes and in the requests and in the tantrums of a 2-year-old, right? We don't have to be taught to ask the first question. We all we're prone. This is what the way we lean naturally is to ask the question, what is best for me today? What is best for me right now? We need to shift and begin asking, what is best for God's kingdom long term? What is best for me today? At the time that Moses was born, there was an edict issued by Pharaoh, and the edict went something like this. Anytime there's a baby born around here, if it's a male child, kill him. Okay? So that's the environment that this faith story for Moses starts out with. If there's a male child born to any of you, make sure that the male child is killed. That's the edict that Pharaoh has given. And so when you read in verse 23 that Moses' mother hides him for 3 months, the reason she's doing that is so that he doesn't get murdered. Okay? I hope you would do the same thing. And so after 3 months, however, she feels like she can't hide little Moses anymore. And so she puts him, come on, you've either read this in Exodus or seen the Prince of Egypt, right? Puts him in a basket, puts him in the basket in the river, and lo and behold, Pharaoh's daughter is the one who discovers this little boy. And Pharaoh's daughter instantly and immediately becomes a mom to Moses. Pretty interesting stuff. And so what you have in verse 24 of Hebrews 11, just to give the background there, the author is saying, by faith Moses, when he was grown up, he refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter, choosing rather to be mistreated with the people of God. Sometimes when you and I are called by God to move forward in faith and reject the status quo, this sounds wild because we're used to enjoying our privileges in life, but sometimes you and I must set aside the privilege that we have. Right? Your salary gets you privileges. Your relational network gets you certain privileges. Your experience and education offers you certain privileges. I'm not saying we should never enjoy those. Sometimes we should. But one of the things I see is God moving things forward in the lives of people around me. I see business owners not taking a salary from a company so that the vision can move forward. I see parents deciding to do certain things with their children so that it can move forward. We have a couple in our church who's moved here from Arizona to take care of their parents who are aging and in bad health. And you might go, well, how is that setting aside privilege? Well, they had to leave their jobs to do so. While in Arizona, they had a great house, they had jobs, and they've just now found some jobs. And so who knows what it will look like. But Moses has to set aside what privilege? Tell me what you would choose, and don't put your church goggles on to answer this, okay? If you had the choice to be a prince in Pharaoh's family or a slave with God's people, what would you choose? And if you say slave, you're coming right here beside me. Prince or princesses, right? No one's going to choose to be a slave unless you get convinced that God has something else in store. None of us would choose slavery. But it says that Moses chose to be mistreated with the people of God rather than enjoy the fleeting pleasures of sin. People want to know, Ben, how do I know if I'm living a life that's more of a status quo life, maintaining a status quo life, or rejecting the status quo? Here's how you can know if you're living a status quo life. You always choose what is easiest, and you rarely, if ever, choose what demands suffering or sacrifice. Okay? Ben, how do I know if am I staying in line with what my next faith move is from God? I'm not saying it won't ever be easy. I'm not saying it'll always involve suffering or sacrifice, but at times, if we're going to follow God, I don't know one story in the scriptures that was exemplary faith where they didn't have to suffer or sacrifice at some point in time. You and I will too. You and I will too. So he sets aside privilege, and he does so because he's willing to lay aside what might be good for him in the moment because he's leveraging his life for what's good for eternity. He's leveraging his life for what is going to be true forever and ever. Look at the end of 25. It says he chose to be mistreated rather than enjoy the fleeting pleasures of sin. Now, all of us have sinned in our lives, right? Again, if you're not in that camp, you can come to the stage as well. We've all sinned at some point in our lives, and here's why. Because the fleeting pleasure that comes from sin, somehow it promised us that it would last longer than a moment, right? Think about this, and I'm not going to play the worst scenes from your movie or my movie this morning, because I would be running out of here quickly, of your life, but think about it like this. How much would you and I have been spared if we would have thought about long-term implications over short-term pleasure? Think about it in your businesses. Think about it in your relationships. Think about it where those moments where temptation was strong and you gave in. How much different would your regret list be? How much different would the pain and shame that you felt? And not that Jesus doesn't cover that, he does. But how much would we have been spared from if we would have thought, what are the long-term implications of this, not simply the short-term pleasure? My life would be different. What about yours? It promised us so much, and it seemed like it would last so long, and then in a moment, it's gone. And we were just left with the shame. And we were just left with the regrets. It says that Moses, he had to lay aside what's best for him today. He didn't always do this, but he had to lay aside what was best for him today because he was looking forward, verse 26 says, to the reward. He considered the reproach of Christ greater wealth than the treasures of Egypt. Listen, one of the key things that many of you are struggling with, and I see God freeing many of you in this area, some of the things for us in this room is that we believe that the greatest physical wealth is greater than what we could get spiritually. And Moses is just going, no, I rejected what was offered to me by being a part of Pharaoh's family because I wanted to be in on the thing that God was doing. Listen, I'm not saying that what God's doing in your life won't lead to greater salary in some ways, but there will be times where you will have to ask yourself this question, is it worth it? Is it worth it? Here's the second question shift I want us to go through. Looking at verse 27, here's the shift. We need to shift from asking the question, who or what should I fear, to asking the question, who keeps me from fearing? Look at verse 27. Let's shift from asking, because if you ask this question, right, is there anything to fear? The answer is yes. Absolutely. There are a lot of things. If you're going to accomplish and attempt something that God's put on your heart, a God-sized kind of task, are there things to fear? Absolutely, but it's just not the best question. It says in verse 27 that Moses was not afraid of Pharaoh. Everyone was afraid of Pharaoh. Everyone was afraid of Pharaoh. Everyone was afraid of Pharaoh. And Moses, at times, if you read the Exodus account, you will find that he wasn't without fear always. But when the author of Hebrews gives us this, it says that he wasn't afraid of the king at this point in time. Which leads me to think of this. If you and I have the same fears as everyone else in the world who doesn't have God in their lives, what's the point of God in our lives? Right? Like if we have the same fears as everyone else out there, what's the point? Because this will remind you of a couple of things. Paul, writing in Romans chapter 8, verse 31, he says, if God is for us, who can be against us? The psalmist would say it this way in Psalm 27:1, the Lord is my light and my salvation, of whom shall I fear? The Lord is the stronghold of my life, of whom shall I be afraid? Moses knew that Pharaoh was the most powerful man on earth. Key phrase there, on earth. But he knew that there was something more going on than just what was on the earth. You will encounter things that will be the greatest obstacles you could imagine that should cause great fear in your life when you look around what's going on this earth. Moses looked beyond that. So we need to shift from going, who or what is present that I should be afraid of, and begin asking, who is this God who can keep me from fearing? While Pharaoh may be the most powerful person on earth, earth isn't all that exists, is it? The next shift we need to make is this, from asking, what difficult circumstances do I see? And begin asking, do I really believe the invisible God is present? When you ask the question, what difficult circumstances do I see? There are difficult circumstances there, right? Shauna and I are trying to adopt this girl in India. Lots of obstacles. We wouldn't get the wrong answer if we asked ourselves the question, Are there obstacles? Absolutely. In your life, with God calling you to start a new business, with Him calling you to reconcile a relationship, are there obstacles? Absolutely. But can you ask this question instead? Do I really believe the invisible God will be present? Look at how Moses survived and even how he thrived. The end of 27, it says, by faith he left Egypt, not being afraid of Pharaoh. Here's how. He endured as seeing Him who is invisible. He endured as seeing Him who is invisible. When God calls you to something in your life, there will be moments when physically nothing will give you hope. You will see nothing that looks awesome. You will see nothing that looks filled with hope. You will see only the obstacles, and there's just nothing there. So I've got to ask you this. Are you trusting in anything that you can't currently see? Are you trusting in anything that you can't currently see? Remember what faith is. Here's Hebrews 11:1. Don't forget this. Now, faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. But Ben, how can I move forward if I don't see it? How can I have faith if I don't see it? Well, you can't have faith if you do. Isn't that crazy? Everybody's like, Ben, if I just knew the contract would go through, I would buy it. Ben, if I just knew she would say yes, I would ask her. Ben, if I just knew I could get the job, I would apply. God's called you to live by faith. In fact, it would go on to say in Hebrews 11:6, right, that without faith it is not possible to please God. So here's a question. What are you believing God for that you can't quite see today? What are you believing God for that you can't quite see today? Let me give you a few of mine that might jog some thoughts in your own brain. This is from past, present, and future for myself. Shauna and I had to believe that God would bring a church into existence before we knew any of you physically existed. We're so thankful you do exist, right? I mean, that was the big fear. So we're glad that you actually have skin and you're people. Like, we're so glad that there are people who make up this church. But we had to believe before we knew one of you, like not even one of you. We had to believe that God could bring something into existence that we could not physically see. One thing that Shauna and I do every single week is pray for the wives of our boys. And our boys, are they in their teens yet? No, they're 5, 7, and 9. And we assume we haven't met their wives yet. At least none of them have passed the test. Right? 6 or 7. Every time Shauna, she got this from her aunt, but every time she comes across a coin when she's doing laundry, she prays for the boys' wives at that moment. And so really cool. And you're like, Ben, why? Because we want them to be blessed. We believe that God is preparing certain young ladies for them. We want God to do that. We want their families to be great families. We want to be the kind of family that they want to relate to. We want them to meet Jesus at a young age and be faithful to Him. We want them to make wise decisions when they decide where they're going to college. We want to be very heavily prayed into the marriages of our boys. And this girl in India, we've never seen her face yet. We see a lot of faces of Indian girls and you think, is she like that? Is she like this? We've not seen her, but we're leaning in and trusting that God can do for us and provide for us what we can't see with our eyes. There are milestone goals that I have for our church that some of them we're really close to hitting, some of them we're not anywhere close to hitting, and yet I'm leaning in and trying to believe that God will make those things come about. If you only go for things that you can see with your physical eyes, then your spiritual eyes will end up malnourished. If you only pursue things that you can see with your physical eyes, you will miss out on so much because what God is trying to stir in our hearts, we can't see yet. If we could see it, it wouldn't require faith. If it didn't require faith, we couldn't please God in it. But Ben, I want to see it. Of course. Me too. That's really when we have awesome faith though, right? When we can see it all lining up. No. God wants to be well pleased when we believe Him before we can see it physically. Do you see anything spiritually before you can see it physically? I think that's a great next move to make for some of our faith. We need to make that move. So we need to transition from asking, what difficult circumstances do I see, to asking, do I really believe the invisible God is present? Here's the fourth shift we need to make. Out of verse 29, the fourth shift we need to make is from asking, do I have what it takes? And begin asking, do I trust God to do what I can't do? Okay? Many of us, when you get something going on out there, it makes sense, right? You ask this question, and I ask it too. Do I have what it takes to get the promotion? Do I have what it takes to start the church? Do I have what it takes to become a parent for the first time? Do I have what it takes to move across the country? Do I have what it takes to be able to do this kind of thing? Do I have what it takes? But what if the better question is, do I trust God to do what I can't do? Look at verse 29. It says, by faith, the people crossed the Red Sea as on dry land. And so some of you pragmatists might say, well, Ben, the water was just low that day. It was just not much water. It was like a foot of water, and so they crossed. There's science that goes behind all this. Well, it's interesting that science didn't work for the Egyptians. Look at it. By faith, the people, that's the Israelites, the 2 million or so, somewhere in that range that Moses was leading, by faith, they crossed the Red Sea as though it were dry land. But the Egyptians, when they attempted to do the same, were drowned. If you hang around Epic for long, you're going to hear this phrase, we believe that the favor of God is the greatest possible distinction we could have over our lives, our marriages, our families, our church, your job, your business. That's what we believe. We believe that is the greatest distinction. And you see the favor of God over Moses and the Israelites. Listen, it said when the same people who were probably smarter, the Egyptians were probably smarter, they certainly were more powerful, they probably were more skilled. When the same people attempted to do what the Israelites had just done, they were unable to do that. One of the big things I believe is that when we see something happen that's so unlikely, that's a pretty good hint that God's in it. So you go, well, Ben, I don't even know how I got this job. There were 25 people more qualified. Yeah, when they attempted to do the same, they drowned. If you're like me, men, raise your hand. And if any of you are married, raise your hand. If you feel like you way outkicked your coverage in your marriage, get them up, fellas. I'm not even looking, so I don't have to smite you. You know, listen, there are a lot of people that would love to be married to this lady. So what? She's mine. Deserve it? No, who cares? Who cares? When other people attempt to do the same, That's the distinction. Remember what we said with Abraham and Sarah last week. If they had had children at the age of 25, normal. 190? Remember that the text said Abraham was as good as dead? That's when you go, oh, God is in this. Do you have anything in your life that you're pursuing that you're seeing with your spiritual eyes that can't be explained? Do you have anything that you're doing and you have no business? You aren't qualified. You aren't smart enough. You're not beautiful enough. You have had terrible relationships in the past. You shouldn't be in a good one now. Do you have anything like that where you're going, no, but I'm receiving grace. No, but God's in this. We've got to transition from asking the question, do I have what it takes, and begin asking the question, do I trust God to do what I can't do? And then I want to invite you to eavesdrop on a conversation God has with Moses in Exodus 3. You'll see it on the screen if you don't want to turn there in your Bible. In Exodus 3, there's this conversation with God and Moses. God has made a commitment to come down and rescue Israel. But like he does so oftentimes, when we want him to do it himself, he uses us. And you're like, well, I'm not like Moses. No, Moses was a wimp. Moses was scared. Moses, he was so complacent about going forward initially. So what happens in verse 10 of chapter 3 is God says, Moses, not only am I going to bring my people out and rescue them from the hand of Pharaoh in Egypt, but I'm going to use you to do it. Listen to what Moses says in verse 11. Moses says to God upon hearing that, but Moses said to God, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the children of Israel out of Egypt? Moses asked a standard question, right? How qualified am I? How gifted am I? Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh, the most powerful person that I know of? Who am I that I should go to him and bring them out? Now, in our culture, if you ask that to a friend or a spouse or maybe even a boss, you might get a great pep talk, right? Like here's what it might look like. Like Moses says to God, God, who am I that I can do this? Can't you just picture God going, Moses, you've been playing your whole career for this. Moses, when you took your strengths finder test, like your 5 core strengths, they position you. Moses, your personality on that DISC assessment, anybody taken one of those lately? People are like, what is that? Well, it would help you probably if you're having trouble with relating to your boss. And he's like, God just going, Moses, you have what it takes. I'm a half full kind of God. I believe you can do this. Moses, go for it. God doesn't answer the question directly at all. Moses says, who am I? Look at verse 12. You'd expect God to go, here's who you are, Moses, but he doesn't talk about Moses, he talks about God. Isn't that interesting? We want to know who we are, and God wants to show who he is. Moses says, who am I? God says, verse 12, but I will be with you. No, God, who am I? Do I have what it takes? I will be with you. God, I'm not prepared for this. I will be with you. God, I've never planted a church in downtown San Francisco, but I will be with you. God, we've never been able to have children and we're past the childbearing age, but I will be with you. God, I don't know if I'm ever going to get married, but I will be with you. God, I don't know how to start a business. I don't have the funding, but I will be with you. Is that enough? We've got to shift from asking the question, who am I, and begin asking the question, will God be with us? He finishes by saying, but I will be with you, and this will be the sign for you that I have sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, he's just telling them, here's the confidence. When you have, not if you do, when you have brought the people out of Egypt, you shall serve God on this mountain. Not if, but when. Not if, but when. Can this be enough for us? When we can't see it, when we aren't qualified, when we don't know the answer, when we don't have the funding, when we don't have the experience, when we don't have the relational network, but we sense God prompting something in our hearts, can it be enough for us that he's with us? Is that enough? Because if you're asking the question this morning, do I have what it takes to pull off a God-sized move in my life? Let me tell you as your pastor, you don't. But Ben, I have a PhD. You don't have what it takes. But Ben, I've been going to church 20 years. You don't have what it takes. But Ben, you don't know who I know. You don't have what it takes. Ben, I'm making millions of dollars. You don't have what it takes. You cannot accomplish a God-sized thing in and of yourself. But he can. But he can. Begun every day of this week. I know for the, for like the 8 of you that follow me on Twitter, and the 12 of you that are connected with me on Facebook, you might have saw something like this come out this week. Shauna Pilgreen and I have never seen the hand and favor of God in any week in our entire lives like we did this week. And humbly saying this here, we've seen God do a lot of things. We saw God in 2 years take a college ministry from 90 students to 1,000. We've seen God answer transition questions moving to San Francisco. But this week, and I can't share them all publicly, but I can give you a few. Typically when our staff gets in the office each morning, they get to work hard after it, right? We're working hard, all of that. But every morning this week began by us sharing and exchanging and trying to top each other's story along the favor of God. So we'd pull our chairs together and we'd end up in a circle. So if you guys don't know, we have an office upstairs. We're all in there together, and so we all face different walls. But then we start every day, I think, this week, just by facing each other and saying, I've got a better one. Guess what happened last night? So I'm sitting in a circle with my staff every morning, and one of our staff people, they started tearing up, and they said, my family has never been in a great place that it is today. I'm so grateful to God for that. This week, we saw us go over 200 adults in small groups for the first time in our history as a church. This week, I'm sending my taxes off to Connecticut. My friend does them for free, so if you wonder why I don't use you, that's why. I'm sending our taxes off to Connecticut. I'm at the FedEx right here on First between Mission and Howard. Just so happens, coincidentally, that the person checking me out talks about the years going by really fast. I was overseas for Christmas and New Year's, and I was like, well, where were you? She's like, India. I'm like, oh, that's cool. I said, we're adopting a girl from India, and excited about that. And she said, well, where is she coming from? I told her. Just so happens, I know coincidence, that she's from the same state where our daughter's coming from. Just so happens that she also loves kids. Just so happens that she's willing to teach us the language there and to help our little girl get acclimated to the language and life here. Coincidentally. A lot of things I can't share. And I don't feel like we're entitled to anything. Like I don't feel like we're even entitled to wake up tomorrow. I don't feel like God's entitled to bless our church. I don't feel like we're entitled to our boys having great wives. It's not what this is about. But I want to lean in and ask God to do it. I want to beg him to do it. I want to believe for things I can't see yet. One of those things is when we ended last year, we had a lot to celebrate as a church. And just letting you into a window of my soul, one of the things that was frustrating when I just looked at kind of our metrics, a lot of things we celebrated, so know that. I'm not a pessimist. But one of the things that was a tough situation on my heart is that I wanted to have seen us baptize more people that year. And just began praying, and we did some strategy stuff around this. And just together as a team saying, hey, God, we want you to do this. And so began to pray about that and thought it'd take a long time to see this. So just let you know what you're in the middle of today, whether this is your first time here or you're here weekly. We had the privilege of baptizing 10 people in 2011, which was great. Last year, we had the privilege to baptize 9 people in our church, which was awesome. By the time this service ends, counting the 9:30 service, we will have baptized 9 people on February 24th, 2013. Couldn't see it. I didn't know why. I didn't know what the secret was. But I did express our desire to God. We did strategize around it. We try to use wisdom with faith for sure. 6 people were baptized at the 9:30 service. Brad got to baptize his son. Praise got to baptize a great friend who's become a Christian recently. Pastor Tim got to baptize 4 other people with great stories. And we're getting ready to baptize 3 more here in just a second. I want to remind you all that we do have a 6 o'clock service at least tonight and next week. If something's moved in your heart and you know that baptism is faith's next move for you, here's a commitment we make. We may do it in the future, but for sure on this day, we will go buy you appropriate baptismal clothes from Target before our 6 o'clock service. So if you're looking to have some new gym shorts or whatever, you just need to commit to get baptized, and you can take them. You can take them home with you. What is faith's next move for you? It may be becoming a Christian. Some of you are like, no way, I'm here because my girlfriend's here. I'm here because I heard you guys give out coffee mugs to first-time guests, and they're really cool. I'm here to see my friend get baptized. I think about Jesus when I think about Moses' story and the words that the Hebrews author used. Remember when he said that Moses chose to be mistreated rather than enjoy something temporary, pleasurable? He chose to be mistreated because he was about what was going to happen long term. And this is the story of our historic Christian faith. Jesus chose. Nobody arrested him and killed him, and he had no choice in the matter. Jesus chose to be mistreated temporarily because of what would come eternally. And if you want to repent of your own sin because of the sacrifice of Christ and place your faith in him, I don't know a better moment than right now. What's the next faith move for you? It doesn't have to be huge, leading 2 million people across the Red Sea. It may be reconciling with your mom. You may be forgiving your dad. It might be having an honest conversation with a spouse that you've hurt. It could be, who knows, a career thing, a business thing, starting a ministry thing, jumping in more here at Epic, attaching yourself to this faith community. Today's your day. I don't know. I do know this, though. Faith always has a next move. What's yours? I'm going to pray. Tim's going to baptize at least 3 people that I know of, unless you guys jump in there between now and then. And after he does that, we're going to stand and worship with a couple of songs just declaring what God's up to. Even if you haven't leaned into what God's doing this morning, up to this point, I want to urge you to lean in now. Don't miss this as a community, collectively, and don't miss your opportunity individually. Let's pray.